want to fend for myself, and I want to build people up for them to fend for. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Free Like Me podcast. I'm your host, Clark Fredricks. Guests come on, speak their truth, leave free like me, and hopefully they leave some nuggets of information for you to help you deal with trauma or to improve your lives or just to amuse you. So if you find these interesting, please share them. I would ask that you hit the subscribe button on YouTube. And if you're interested in my coaching program, reach out to me privately and we'll set up a consultation call and we'll get you off of Hell Island and over onto Heaven Island where I'm at. So today, man, I am fired up for today. I can't even tell you. This is like when I get ready for a big speech. I just get all wound up. And I was wound up today. And you're asking yourself, why are you wound up, Clark? Because I am interviewing the prosecutor in my murder case, Greg Muller. He was a gentleman enough to agree to come on the show. I got to take my hat off to him for that. I've got some tough questions for him. He's agreed to give honest answers, and it's going to be an amazing show. So let's meet Greg and get this sucker started. Greg, Mr. Greg Muller, my prosecutor in my case. Thanks for being here.
Yes, sir. I'm very happy to be here.
I got to take my hat off to you. You're in a hot seat today, and I really think it shows a lot of character for showing up for this.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm glad I could be here. I'm really happy to be here. I've been following everything that you've been doing, and any way I can offer my support to your message out there, I want to do it.
Yeah, it's it's been a hell of a turnaround from where I was when you arrested me. Or not when you arrested me, but when you began trying me. I was near death from drugs, alcohol, despair, suicide, ideation, you name it,
Yeah.
And did I expect to be here and where I'm at today? No. I thought my life was over.
Yeah, I would probably say the same thing. I got to know what you were going through pretty early on after I got involved with the case, and but I got to know you over time, and I got to see your character a little bit, and some of the resolve, the determination that I thought that you had, and you were somebody at the end of it all. You had said to me that you were going to try to make a positive difference, and it was something about the way that you said it, the look on your face. You meant it.
Yeah.
You meant it. And so, after I got to know you, I'm not necessarily all that surprised that you had this turnaround, because you had it in you. You had it in you. So,
Thanks, man. When I got arrested, I sat in the jail, and I'm like, I just can't believe how I let it slip through my fingers. I took it for granted. I didn't appreciate it. I woke up miserable every day, and now I'm facing life in prison. And to me, life was over. And I'm like, man, I just can't believe I let life get away from me.
That's why I love your story. Never surrender.
Right.
Never surrender.
And I post it all the time, like, what you're experiencing today is not what you're going to experience a year, 2, 3. I'm 12 years removed from that.
Definitely.
So it's not like it happened overnight.
No, definitely. But it's a journey.
You don't get to Everest on your first day climbing.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, Clark, whatever's going on, in my life, how everything is algorithm based today, right? So what comes up in my feed on YouTube, you just popped up on my feed one day. I don't know if I needed, inspiration or what it was, but suddenly, I'm seeing Clark, on my feed, and that was excellent.
Wow.
And I follow some of your messages,
Awesome.
Yeah.
In your wildest dreams, going back 12 years ago, did you ever think the tables would be turned and I would get to basically interrogate you?
No, I did, especially not back then. As I watched you progress, I thought, more recently, that maybe something like this would come together. But
Yeah, when I started the podcast, I mean, you're like episode 22, I think. And like, I didn't even think about asking you to come on until just, maybe midway through. I'm like, you know what? Why don't I try to get the prosecutor on?
yeah.
And you agreed. I was like, huh.
Of course, man. It's from a legal perspective, the case is a fascinating case. Your personal journey, a fascinating story. So yeah, I think it's a good idea to, we've talked a few times.
Yeah.
And we've gotten to know each other a little bit, and we've talked about the case. So we've you can go down a lot of different paths with it.
And I'm going to ask you some tough questions today.
That's all right. Fair enough.
And I put it out onto Instagram, that you were coming on, and what do you want me to ask the prosecutor? And some of them I had to X out because it involved revenge.
Yeah. Yes.
People,
Well,
get a little crazy, but there was a lot of, good, tough questions, and I said to people, yep, I'm going to ask. So,
a lot of times, right? Who's wearing the black hat? Who's wearing the white hat? Right? A lot of people in the criminal justice system, I do defense work too. I think defense attorneys wearing the black hat. Prosecutors always the white hat.
Right.
This was a case, a serious case where there was a real question: who's wearing?
Which
am I wearing the white hat here?
Right.
So I get that.
Yeah.
I do.
So before we go into any questions, and then we're going to dive into my case, obviously, and we'll dissect it.
Okay.
But tell me about Greg Muller. Tell me about your upbringing, where you were raised, your family life, and then we'll get into how you became a lawyer and a prosecutor.
I was blessed. I really was. I had a great upbringing. Grew up in Union County. And Westfield.
That's New Jersey, everybody.
Yep, yeah. New Jersey, lifelong Jersey resident until relatively recently. I'm actually out in PA right now.
Okay.
But grew up in Union County. Great parents. Had a sister. She's wonderful. A little tough to grow up with, only because she was perfect. I mean, she never got in trouble. And I was kind of the black sheep of the family a little bit, and so, but. Just a great family. Had a lot of good friends. It was a great upbringing. We're of similar age, right? So we grew up around the same time frame. It was a nice time to grow up. Went to Westfield High School. At best, an average student.
Okay.
I needed.
Was your father a lawyer?
No, my dad was in the medical field.
Okay.
He eventually was a hospital administrator. He was a pharmacist. He always, I think, hoped that I might go into medicine someday.
Okay.
I did not have the aptitude. I just did science, math, struggled. Good at other things, but at best, just an average student. And I needed a wake-up call. I ended up going to military school my senior year.
Yeah.
Graduated from Valley Forge Military Academy.
That's hold the phone.
Did you know that about me? Or
no, but in seventh grade, I've already had the trauma done to me, and not having any coping skills, I start smoking weed at 12.
Yep.
And I come home one day, and on my bed is a pipe, a bag of weed, and rolling papers that I had in a little safe in my room. And my father comes walking in behind me, and he's like, I am not putting up with this shit. And he's like, this stops today. He goes, or else I already researched a military school by Philly, Valley Forge Military Academy, and your ass will be there.
Yeah.
And
it would have worked. I'm telling you. So I got a lot of props for Valley Forge Military Academy. Most of the kids who wind up going there have gotten off track, a little bit, and but there's potential, and it's a perfect place for kids like that. Like, you're up at 4:00 in the morning. You talk about a disciplined life. I went from, probably like I don't know, maybe a C at best student, C+ student, to I was third in my class there. Suddenly I was forced to study.
Right.
So
Greg, you were such a lackadaisical student that your father even had a idea for a career for you, right?
He did. He thought, he would pop up. The first one I remember was, maybe a park ranger, right? That actually appealed to me.
Not bad.
Yeah. That was a good one. But the second one caught my attention, which was, maybe you could be a toll booth collector, so they're looking at my grades and it was just that thought of car after car coming at me for like 30 years, right? At whatever. And he used to always play it up to me, you're in the pension system, you're actually a state employee. All right, I got to get serious, right? I got to buckle down. And so, went to military school. I did well academically there. I ended up going to Guilford College. I was a lacrosse player in high school. And so they had a...
Still any thought of becoming a lawyer?
No,
first year in college?
No thought of becoming a lawyer. No idea what I wanted to do. Believe it or not, I started out as an art major. My dad, I don't know if funding would have kept coming if I stayed with art. And I would have starved as an artist. I wasn't very good at it. No.
It's a stupid question. Just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Is every prosecutor a lawyer?
Yes.
That's a prerequisite.
It is.
Just want to make sure.
It is.
Right. Okay.
Have to be a lawyer. I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I was looking at the classifieds, and I saw a lot of jobs for accounting. So I decided I'll major in accounting. I can at least have a job while I'm figuring it out. And so that's what I majored in. My first job was with KPMG Pete Mulrick. That's an auditing and consulting firm.
Yeah.
I did that for 4 years. I became a supervising senior accountant, decided to leave to go to law school. So I made the decision while I was at KPMG that I wanted to be a lawyer.
Okay.
So I went to Duquesne Law School, made my mom happy. First Catholic school I went to, so mom was happy. Did pretty well there, came out of there, and did a clerkship for a criminal judge, and then applied to be a prosecutor. I hit all 21 counties in New Jersey. Pretty competitive job back then, tough to get in, and I got in Morris County. So that was my first job.
Started.
Yeah, Morris County. I was there about 3 years, and so
Can you recall what your first case was?
Yes, it was. I was brand new. Had been a prosecutor maybe about 5, 6 months, 7 months, and it was a stolen car case. Pretty simple case. Eyewitness saw a guy steal a car. They get a description. They eventually find the car parked near the guy's house, and he's charged. So pretty simple. The trial went on for 3 weeks because not only was I brand new, the judge was brand new to criminal. He had been a civil judge, never did a criminal trial before.
I mean, a stolen car sounds like it should be 2 days and wrapped up.
It should have been. It should have been. So neither the judge or I really had the tools to rein in the defense attorney, who was a very experienced guy. And he was just having fun for like 2-3 weeks.
Right.
And the case probably should have gone about a week, because in New Jersey, jury selection, even on a case like that, can take 2-3 days. But ultimately, he was convicted. So, that was my first trial, my first major crime trial. I think that would have been in 1996, was in 1998. And that was a individual who went into a Walgreens, and it was a bad robbery. I mean, gunpoint robbery, taught up the employees, that whole thing. So, very good attorney out of New York, and yeah.
Have you neglected to prosecute any cases?
Yeah, well, although I would take issue with the word neglect only. Like, we've decided, use discretion not to prosecute certain cases under certain fact patterns. One of the jobs of a prosecutor is to screen cases when they come in, right? The police typically are the ones that will issue charges against folks. And the standard for a charge is probable cause. That's it. when we're prosecuting, though, we have to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. And so we do get to exercise some discretion in sometimes dismissing or downgrading charges. And that's done fairly routinely, maybe even with about, if I had to peg a number on it, maybe 15 to 20% of cases don't get prosecuted by our office. Some might get remanded to municipal court on a lesser charge. So yeah, we've passed on prosecuting, a particular case. And by the way, sometimes on a serious case when we can't prosecute, that really hard discussions that you have to have with victims and victims' families as to why you can't.
Why on a serious case wouldn't you prosecute? What would be some of the things? You don't have to give me like a specific case, but
on a serious case, I mean, the main consideration is going to be proofs. Can we prove it beyond a reasonable doubt? And prosecutors we have ethics rules that are special to prosecutors that say if we don't feel we can prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt, we're really not supposed to prosecute that case.
Do prosecutors ever come up getting reprimanded, let's, if that's the right word, for going against those ethics?
Yeah, so I was the first assistant prosecutor in Sussex County for a lot of years.
So in the hierarchy chain, you have the head prosecutor, and then you're next below.
Head prosecutor, first assistant, right? So, and prosecutors' offices are really unique agencies. It's part police department, it's part law firm, right? So there's like dual chains of command. You have the detective side, and they report up to the chief. And then you have the lawyer side, and in my office, they report it up to me. And the chief and myself, we report to the prosecutor.
The head prosecutor.
Yeah. So, and you kind of have these parallel chains of command. It's
now a head prosecutor is like a figurehead. He's not usually prosecuting cases, is he?
Not usually prosecuting cases. It's actually a very busy job. Be surprised how much time is taken up with statewide issues and all sorts of collateral issues that the prosecutor has to deal with outside of just the day-to-day operation of the office. So it's almost even a requirement. We've had some pretty good lawyers as prosecutors during my tenure. Francis Koch, he was a trench guy. He was the last prosecutor that I worked with. He came up through the trenches. He came with every intention of trying a case while he was the prosecutor, but just could not find the time to do it. Right. At the end of the day. Yeah. Right. So it is more of a figurehead type of position.
Okay.
Definitely.
Why does it seem to some, in some cases, that perpetrators are given more rights than victims?
I understand that perception.
Right.
I really do. Now victims, I will say this. In New Jersey, not too long ago, victims got constitutional rights themselves in connection with a criminal proceeding. There is a victim Bill of Rights that is applicable, which says that we have to treat victims of crime with dignity, compassion, and respect at all times. And it seems wrong that we would even have to have that rule. Like, that should just be, But a lot of times when we're dealing with victims as prosecutors, you got to remember there are also witnesses. So we have to be careful in how we deal with them. It gets a little complicated. Victims do have rights in connection with a criminal proceeding, but defendants have a lot of rights. And as a defense attorney, and I say this a lot in openings and closings, our system, it's an accusatorial system, which means it's relatively easy to charge somebody. The standard is only probable cause. There's not a lot of review of that complaint. And it's to the point where if somebody goes down and alleges and is willing to swear it out that somebody did something illegal, did something that violates our criminal code, that you could very well be charged. The only way a system like that makes sense or can work is, okay, we might be easy to charge you, but it's going to be tough to convict you. You know, so we have to have a lot of rights. Right to a trial, of course. The state's burden is high. Right to full disclosure and discovery of everything the state has. Right to cross-examine witnesses. Right to remain silent if you choose to. All of those things, I think, are necessary to make sure we don't get it wrong, you know, that they're all in place to try to make sure that we don't wrongly convict somebody.
It seems like you'll hear a case every now and then where a prosecutor has bended the law in order to go after somebody and make charges, you know?
I would agree with that. I've seen that also where I see people that are overcharged or should not be charged,
Right.
in my view. I think that prosecutors' offices need to have very good screening, you know, by the prosecutors, bringing the right cases to trial on the right charges.
Who oversees you guys? Like if there's an impropriety going on?
So,
Attorney General?
yeah, the Attorney General is over us. Absolutely. I wouldn't say that they actively supervise us, you know, on a day-to-day, but if somebody makes a complaint, yes,
And it's valid.
And it's valid. Yeah. Yeah. And they do get them, you know, different people in a prosecutor's office, they get them all the time and they will investigate. Sometimes they'll turn it over to us to investigate if it's not too serious, but.
Let me ask you, what guides you? Morals, faith. Are you a man of faith? People question if you had any morals whatsoever on Instagram.
I understand. I do. And I have to separate, right? There's Greg Muller, me. I'm here as a citizen, as a person talking to you today, right? And but when I dealt with you on the case, I was representing the state of New Jersey, you know, as a prosecutor, as a lawyer. And so, you know, I guess I have a set of guideposts that govern me professionally and govern me personally. You know, my personal life, my faith is a huge part of it. I was blessed to have a good upbringing, great parents, taught me good values. You know, my mom was Catholic. My dad was Catholic also, but my mom was really a, you know,
Practicing
Catholic, right? She was, you know, church every day type of person. Her dream in life was for me to be a priest. Like, I'm sorry, you know, I was way off the mark there.
Right.
So, you know, my mom has been a good guidepost. My dad too, my faith. But on the legal side, you know, we have ethics rules. There's somebody, Justice Jackson, all right? He's my favorite jurist. Justice Robert Jackson wrote, well, he gave a speech once called The Good Prosecutor. So Justice Jackson, he's the only lawyer I know to hit what I call the trifecta of the hardest positions in the law to attain. The three hardest, he hit all three. He was Supreme Court Justice, U.S. Attorney General, and U.S. Solicitor General, right? And he, in this speech, it was entitled The Good Prosecutor. He lays out the principles of, in my view, I kept that speech taped to my wall my entire career as a prosecutor. And really what it taught, or what it tells you, is to always be mindful of the authority that you have. You know, it's a tremendous amount of authority that we give prosecutors. Give them a badge, right? And you give them the decision-making, you know, power over other people and their liberty. I mean, should stagger anyone. You gotta be you gotta take that with humility. And
In our county, we have organization Daisy for domestic abuse. We have Ginny's House for child abuse. Have you ever donated to a charity like either one of those?
just time.
Just time.
Time. Yeah, a lot of time.
Okay.
Yeah, over the years. So I donate to different charities within, I guess, the agencies that I worked with. It was mostly just donating my time, you know.
Why does it seem that drug cases have gotten a higher penalty than some child abuse cases? You know, I had a lot of people reach out to me like, you gotta ask why drug conviction cases are getting a higher sentence than a abuse sentence.
From a moral standpoint, you can't justify that.
Right.
You know, it's unjustifiable.
Because it has occurred.
It has occurred. In practical terms, I would say this. It goes back to sort of what we were talking about before. What was that movie, Trading Day, with Denzel Washington, where he says, it's not about what you know, it's about what you can prove, right? So we have to look at whether we can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And I can tell you, I've tried, as a prosecutor, aggravated sexual assault trials against children, and bringing in a young child to come in and testify is a big deal, you know, for the family, for that child. And it's hard. I mean, it's a hard process, and we do our best to make it, you know, as painless as we possibly can, but it still is difficult. And so we have to look at those cases very carefully, and if we don't feel or we don't have a lot of confidence in our ability to convict, then a lot of times we'll cut a deal to avoid having to bring the child through that ordeal for what very well may be a bad result at the end of it. And so that's why deals are made. It's solely based on the proofs
On
and
what you
we
can prove.
Yeah.
And what the child's willing to go through.
And what the child can do. It. So like that gets to be a collaborative effort too. You know, a lot of times, you know, these children get into therapy. We want to talk to the therapist about.
Don't you have a thing now? When did this come into being applied, the tender year exception?
Yeah. Okay. That was a very, very big change in the law.
And when was that?
I don't remember the precise year, but
Okay.
it was during my career.
Just explain to the audience what the tender year exception does.
So it allows a child under the age of 12, their out-of-court statement. Well, let me back up a little bit. The first thing that we do now on a sexual assault case is when they bring the victim in, they're interviewed in a very professional way. They do a forensic interview. It's called Finding Words. Highly trained detectives interviewing these children. That's a monumental change to how things used to be.
With detective with a cigarette dangling out of his mouth.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what happened?
Exactly. Yeah. Like so. I'm sure we'll get into this later, but you know, people came forward in connection with your case, other people, right? You know.
Well, let me just stop you there since you brought that up. You uncovered, you know, a few cases involving Dennis Pegg, my abuser.
Yes.
And two of them were Boy Scouts who, after going on weekend jamborees, had hickeys on their bodies. And one set of a mother brought her son to the state police, and the next day the father came in and recanted and said, I don't want my son labeled gay.
Yeah.
And then in the other case, the parents brought the son in who had the hickeys on his body. And then, you know, a short time later, whether it was a week or two, they just said, we can't put our child through interrogation or a trial, and they dropped the charges.
And so those kids, they went into a state police barracks, you know?
Back then,
right? And they're going to be brought into an interrogation room, which are designed to be a little intimidating. You know, they're small rooms, there are no windows, you know, there's a lot of psychological aspects to those rooms. And so these children, you know, it's very intimidating. And you're talking to some guy, right, who really has no specialized training in interviewing a young child. So law enforcement has gotten much better at that. Through this course, Finding Words, they've learned how to talk to kids. And
so in your prosecutor's office, you have detectives that are specially trained to
we do
interrogate, if you want to use that word, children.
Yes, and we're not going to bring them into an interrogation room. This is going to be done in like a it looks like a living room. You know, there's a couch, there's windows. You know, it's just they're kids' toys there. You know, it's just a nice, relaxing place for kids to be able to talk, trying to break down those barriers. And there are ways to get them talking and more comfortable. And the police have gotten very good at that. So some of the problems back in the 80s that those people experienced, and you know, with the recantations, I think it would be less likely today that would happen. We've also come a long way, you know, to reporting these offenses.
Yeah, we'll talk in a minute about the laws. Somebody on Instagram made a comment to somebody else, and I told them I thought they were completely wrong, but I want to ask you anyway. Can someone simply walk into a police station or a prosecutor's office, make a claim that, you know, Jim Bob over there, you know, touched me 30 years ago, and then you guys monitor his behavior or follow him or get a subpoena for his phone? Or can it can't be that simple. I told the person no.
I would agree with that. So let's expand that, though, a little bit. If somebody goes down to the police department and can we take your example?
Yeah.
You saw Dennis Pegg in a quick check with a young child, close in time to the homicide, right? And that was a trigger for you. So I can tell you, I had to ask myself this question also. You know, what could Clark have done, you know, there? And what could he have done? All right, you know, I guess approach Dennis Pegg. That probably wouldn't have ended well, and who knows? You would have been arrested.
Well, when I did approach him, we saw how it ended.
Exactly. Yeah, at least it was a public place. Maybe it's just, you know, a bad beating. You know, but that's not really an option. And you hadn't opened up about your truth yet. Right. So you weren't ready to do that. So had you gone to the police department? I had asked that question. Could Clark have gone to the police station? When he saw that, would that have made a difference? And no, it wouldn't have, because what are you going to say? You weren't ready to talk about what happened to you 30 years ago. I saw Dennis Pegg with a young guy at the quick check. How are you going to act on that in any way, shape, or form? You can't get any sort of warrant. It doesn't even justify really opening an investigation at that point.
Right.
So that would be my view on that. But I want to take it, you know, if there's somebody out there that is aware of something and, you know, might want to go to the police department with it, I don't want to discourage them from doing that, because you never know. It's always good to get something on.
They could have 10 other complaints that just came in about somebody.
You just don't know, right? And so I don't want to discourage anybody from going forward, but understand law enforcement, they can't just open an investigation based on very little, you know, or almost nothing. And they certainly can't get anything like a warrant, you know, or anything where they can really investigate.
Yeah, so, if I had walked into a police station and said, I just saw Dennis Pegg with a young boy. Yeah. And they'd be like, okay. Yeah. Was it his family member? Was it neighbor's son that he's taking getting a cold drink? Or and I say, you know, if I blurted it out, you know, like he raped me 33 years ago.
And I don't know that you were ready for that.
No, at that point I wasn't. But
And even if you
still the law as it read wouldn't have been able to do anything.
No,
just
no.
with an allegation of 33 years ago.
So with what happened to you, the statute of limitations had passed. There's nothing really they could do about that. It's good information, though, for law enforcement to have.
So since you brought my case up, and I was going to go into that a little later, but since we're right there now, what could I have done? What could I have done in that moment, seeing him with a young boy? Is there anything I could have done? Any avenue, really, that I could have gone down?
No, not that I can think of. I mean, we talked about the one. I guess that would be maybe the most obvious to folks, or that they might think is, why not report it, right? And we just talked about some of the limitations there.
So, while we're right here, what was the law then? How far back could the law go? So it was 30 plus years for me. The law in 2012 went back how many?
The statute of limitations now. So, like, if we talk about that with.
Yeah, well, that's going to be my next question. But what was the statute of limitations for criminal back then?
5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
So with me being 33 years,
Not
zero.
even close.
It'd
Right.
be like, you're 28 years removed, bro.
Yes.
So
yes.
nothing at all legally wise. And the civil law for a lawsuit back then was 18 to 20. Like, I would have had to come forward after being raped at 12. When I turned 18, I had a 2-year window.
Yeah.
Who's going to do that?
Exactly.
So I worked with other advocates to get a new civil law passed, statute of limitations, and now it goes up to age 55.
And you did a great job with that, and that's a real service to the people of our state.
Right.
That you did that. And on the criminal side, there have been changes also.
So the criminal side, I believe, changed in 2018.
Yeah.
And what precipitated that, and what's it now?
Well, it had been changing for a while. So eventually it got to the point where
Didn't it go to 10 years?
Yeah, 10 years, and then when the child.
Then that was it.
Right, so many years from when the child turns 18, and but eventually got to no statute of limitations. So that's where we are today. And
what precipitated the change for that? Was there a case?
No, it was a legislative effort that did it, and there was a recognition that.
I thought it was named after somebody. The new criminal law in 2018, wasn't it off?
Jessica
girl?
Lunsford.
Jessica Lunsford.
Is that who you're thinking?
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So, and by the way, we have the Jessica Lunsford Act in New Jersey, and so that's another great change to the law. That people, if there's penetration with somebody under the age of 13, that is now you're facing life. It's a life sentence. The shortest sentence a judge can legally mete out there is 25 years. So it's 25 years to life for penetration under the age of 13.
All right, that's a good jump.
Yeah, that's a good jump.
I mean, have you seen where Florida and Tennessee have enacted capital punishment for aggravated sexual assault?
I have. Okay. I have. Now, I do think that will get a constitutional challenge, right? Because under the law currently, the death penalty is still allowed in this country, but only for, murder, first degree intentional murder. So we'll see. That issue has to go up. You've seen other states have been discussing chemical castration,
right.
And I do think in some states that's permitted so long as it's voluntary. Can't be imposed. Although one state, I think just recently, well, I have to look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So.
Since you segued into chemical castration.
Yeah. Why did I do that?
You just opened up Pandora's box for a big question I had.
Okay.
And I want you to be honest. Can pedophiles be rehabilitated? Can the vast majority, yes, I'm sure anybody can be rehabilitated, but can the vast majority of them be rehabilitated?
It's a great question. And I have to preface my answer, and I don't want to sound like I'm avoiding it, but it's better posed to a psychologist, than perhaps a lawyer. All right. So with that caveat.
With that cop out.
Thank you.
What do the stats show in New Jersey? All right. When I was in Northern State Prison, my therapist came to me and said, Clark, I don't want anybody. When you're locked up, it's called putting a battery pack on your back, getting you all amped up.
Yeah.
So she goes, I don't want anybody putting a battery pack on your back and making you do something stupid. But on your unit, 1 out of 3, closer to 2 out of 3 guys are there for a sex crime.
Yes.
I'm like, really? And I said to her, I go, all right, let me ask you a question. What are you, as a therapist in a prison, doing for those guys while they're here? And just so people don't think this is right wing, left wing, Republican, Democrat. She was very liberal. You know, to be a social worker in a prison, it's a very you got to be a liberal.
Yeah, it's a hint.
And she made no qualms about it, and just a fantastic, wonderful lady. And her answer shocked me. She goes, "We do absolutely nothing." I go, "What?"
Wow.
And she goes, "Clark, they're master manipulators. They're liars. They don't want therapy. They don't want help. We can't force them into it. If they come to us, absolutely." But she goes, "We basically do nothing." So I go, "They're serving their sentence here, getting no help, and they're going to go out and probably reoffend." And she's like, "Yes." And I was shocked.
Yeah. So, if you're sentenced on certain offenses, aggravated sexual assault, certain offenses under endangering the welfare of a child, before you're sentenced, you go to a place called Avenel to be evaluated.
And what is Avenel, just so people know? This is in New Jersey.
Avenel is one of the prison complexes that specializes in the treatment of sex offenders.
Okay.
So, and they try to make a determination if you're something that they call repetitive and compulsive. Have you done this repeatedly, and do you have the inability to stop yourself? If you meet that criteria, you're eligible to be sentenced at Avenel. Avenel, for some offenders, I think some prefer a sentence at Avenel, others want to avoid it. You're there with other like offenders, so there's a degree of safety in that, in the sense that, for a sex offender, prison can be a dangerous place. That's why you didn't know. So many of your fellow inmates had that charge.
Right.
They keep that quiet.
Right.
I can say this. I have not, my own experience is I have not seen a meaningful difference in recidivism from people coming out of Avenel versus prison. So
they're getting all this therapy and help and treatment at Avenel, and it's not like a huge difference in the reoffending rate.
Yeah. So from my perspective,
might be a couple points less. But.
Almost 30 years in the criminal justice system, I've handled a lot of these cases. I have not seen a lot of evidence, really much at all, of any sort of meaningful rehabilitation of any of these folks, whether the services were offered or not.
Wow, that's frightening, dude.
Well, it is. It is.
I mean, we have in Jersey Megan's Law, so
Yeah.
I'm sure coming out they have to register, right?
Yeah, we have Megan's Law, so the community's notified. We have parole supervision for life, which is tougher than Megan's Law, a lot tougher. I mean, you're on parole for life, and that is a meaningful intrusion. The parole is actually pretty strict. I've talked to some people who've had to deal with it, and it's not that easy. Also, we have sexual violent predators, that if you get labeled, in that manner as a sexually violent offender, you're eligible for commitment. after you
civilly committed.
After you serve your sentence, right? And
in Northern State, we had a guy, who was our laundry guy. Seemed like a decent dude.
Yeah.
He's there for burglaries, he's telling us.
Yeah.
He's getting released. And a day before his release date, they come and shackle him up, take him away in handcuffs. And guys go to the guard on duty like, what'd they just do there? And they're like, do you know what that guy's here for? And we're like, we thought burglaries. And he's like, no, he's a violent sexual predator against children, and he got civilly committed.
So there you go. And once that determination is made, very few of those guys ever get back out. That's a whole separate practice area. There are people who specialize in doing those types of cases. I have not done that work, thankfully. So what happens is, if somebody is up potentially for civil commitment as a sexually violent offender, the prosecutor's office will be notified. We don't do that hearing to determine if they will in fact be committed. That's a representative of the Attorney General's office that will do that, but we do provide input. So we'll write a letter, stake out our position, provide discovery, anything that they might need. So we'll assist with that, but we never got directly involved.
Is it up to the prosecutor to stay on top of a violent sexual predator like that to make sure when they're coming up for release they get civilly committed?
Yeah,
it is.
We keep track of everybody's parole date. So and anybody who gets out of prison, if nothing else, we typically will notify at least the police chief if they're going back to a certain area. Hey, just so you know, Billy Smith is coming back to your jurisdiction. He's getting out of prison on a certain date. Just want to let you know.
Okay.
So, but certainly with those types of offenders, yeah, we stay on top of them.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's the statistics showing that Avenel is not making a major dent in their behavior is frightening, dude. That's tough to get past.
It is,
and it's not like you're making something up or sugarcoat. The stats don't show that it's doing that much.
I have not seen it. I have not seen it.
Like, if you said it cuts it in half, I'd be like, fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
But it's not anywhere near that. It's a couple points less.
Yeah.
Wow, dude.
So.
And I have people reach out to me all the time who are under this assumption, like, it's just a hurt person hurting people. They need help. And one of my therapists, my last therapist I was with, she started her therapy career working in a center for treating pedophiles. And she said it's a myth, Clark, that they were all abused as children. Yeah. She said they come in and they all say that, and they're trying to garner sympathy for what they did.
Yeah.
And she said, and we would put them through a lie detector test. And she goes, 75% failed when asked, were you abused as a child?
So you do hear that a lot with those offenders. Well, they'll raise that as an issue. And that's, again, kind of consistent with my experience is that the vast majority were not.
We're not.
But some were.
Right.
Right. As you go through.
I was keynote speaker for state of Pennsylvania for the probation department for juvenile sex offenders. And the lady who ran it out there, and I agree with her. She said, as children, they're mimicking what was done to them.
Yep.
And she said, I feel it's extremely important to reach them in while they're still young to correct the behavior of what was done to them.
Yes.
And she said, we have them in intensive supervision till age 21, where it's therapy, this class, that. And she goes, it's just, to correct the trauma they experienced. Yeah. She goes, and I feel you can, as a child, correct that behavior. She goes, when somebody's 40, 50 years old and they've been doing it for 20 years, she goes, I really don't think you can correct the behavior then. It's ingrained in them.
That's a very good point, because, and when we talk about use the word pedophile, right? And that can encompass a broad group of people. Like, so, for example, you technically would meet that definition under New Jersey law because it's a second-degree crime. If you're 20 years old and engage in penetration with somebody who's 15, even if you're in a dating relationship and the parents okay it and they seem to love each other and might get married someday, it's still a crime.
Is it 17 and down for rape?
16.
16 and down.
Yeah, so 16 under 16. Yeah. So and a 4-year difference in age.
Okay.
And a 4-year difference in age. So that's why.
So if I was 18, a senior dating a sophomore, and we had sex, and she's 16, that's not a 4-year difference.
Right. So exactly. That's why I'm saying though.
So if I'm 20 in college dating a sophomore in high school,
right,
then it's considered.
And you can have far, creepier examples where you might get somebody in their later 20s, mid 30s with somebody underage. Terrible. Maybe it only happened one time or twice. Like, can that person be rehabilitated? That's a different question than somebody who's been a serial abuser, somebody like the person that we both have in common.
Right.
All right, through the case. That individual, the prognosis for any improvement for Mr. Pegg in
right. Zero improvement for Pegg. You feel.
Yeah.
I had a person reach out to me privately on Facebook. They didn't want to friend me because they were stuck with their shame, and they thought friending somebody who speaks out about abuse would And I just had a young kid on Instagram say the same thing. Like,
wow.
I don't want to follow you, but I wanted to reach out to you because
wow.
I don't want my friends to see that I'm following a dude who speaks out about being molested. And it's just such a shame.
See, the stigma still.
Yeah, the stigma's still there, man. But this guy who reached out on Facebook, this was within a year of my release from prison. He said back in 1971, High Point State Park had summer camps, and that's where I got sent as a young boy. And lo and behold, my camp counselor was Dennis Pegg, and Dennis took quite a liking in me, and you can guess the rest from there. So that's going back to 71.
Yep.
And when I did what I did, it was 2012. So you're talking 81, 91, 2001, 2001. So that's 41 years right there of, you're not going to correct that.
Yeah, you're not going to correct that. And exactly.
And he went from being a camp counselor to being a Boy Scout leader to being a trail angel on the Appalachian Trail, come back to my house for a warm shower and a hot meal.
That's the thing. And he always surrounded himself, right?
And he worked in a jail as a corrections officer, 18, 19, 20-year-old drug addicts come back to my house on your release, and I'll mentor you.
Yeah. You lived in Sussex your whole life, right?
Yeah.
And I lived there for about 20 years. I mean, he was a pretty big figure in the community. He was just well respected. Yeah, he's a lieutenant in the sheriff's department. Boy Scout volunteer, trail angel, all these different things that he did, which gave him access, by the way, to children, but everybody viewed him as this pillar of the community.
All right. So you gave him 0% chance of being rehabilitated after that long of a run.
That's very unscientific, but
right. It's just your personal opinion, right?
Yeah, I'm not optimistic.
Yeah, not optimistic.
Yeah.
You've already said, I already asked you, what could I have done after seeing him in the deli that day?
Yeah.
And you said there was really nothing I could do. And we know what I did.
Yep.
What would Greg Muller have done if you are in my shoes or your child is in my shoes and what could have been, what would you have done? What would
Fair.
A therapist lady on Instagram said, put his name on you or his child's name on you, and let's see what he answers to the story, to the question.
All right, can I give my? Did you call it a cop out before? Can I start with just a quick cop out? So before I answer that, I got to separate the two. You got to remember, man, I'm a lawyer, right? So I have to always guard against, not following the law or taking the law into my own hands or anything like that. I think if what happened to you happened to me, I likely would have gone down a similar path that you did. I know myself pretty well. Like some of the self-destructive behavior, right? I think I wouldn't be sitting here as a former prosecutor in this interview. My life would have taken a different turn, and it would have been good. It would have been dark,
As every abuse victim basically does.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I put myself in your shoes try to put myself in your shoes as that person, that broken person that has been slowly trying to destroy myself, over a period of time.
Right.
What would that Greg Muller have done? I don't know the answer to that. And it's not a cop-out. I don't know the answer to that. I could say this: if my darker angels got the better of me, I would pray for a good lawyer, a fair prosecutor, and a fair judge. So that's
right.
The best way I could answer it.
Okay. Yeah.
It's tough, though.
It's tough.
It's tough.
It's tough.
It's very tough.
When you have really no civil recourse, no legal recourse, and you're a broken individual.
And let me say this too, because I can never justify it, promote it, say it's okay. All right. And the one thing I love about your message, and it's always been, you've never said that. You always said, don't ever let it get to my point. Being in my situation where I was facing a murder charge and brought to this point in my life was horrible, like the wrong thing, right? So, but people are people. I always understood why that incident happened. I understood it. Always understood it.
And why, and why I tell people don't do what I did is because you're going to face a murder charge.
Yes, yes.
All right, you just said you really saw, on your personal opinion, you saw 0% chance of Dennis Pegg's behavior changing. But to do what I did, if you want to risk ruining the rest of your life, and people will say my life's already ruined.
Right.
Well, your life, it may be ruined, but trust me, mine was ruined up to that point, but it got a lot more ruined by doing what I did.
But look at the example you are right now. You know what I mean? Like
I've done it, so I can speak about it.
Yes.
And I urge people, don't do what I did.
Yeah. And you had the handicap of having to go through that horrible event as well. I mean,
that's it. It's not like murder's like a walk in the park.
No.
It does something to your soul.
Yes.
It's
yes.
bloody. It's gory. It's horrific. It's traumatic.
Yes.
And people think, every women and men and Republican and Democrat, they all reach out to me and say, you did what I want to do. And I get it, because the pain, what was done to you is so severe that your mind can only think, I want to kill this person.
Yeah.
That's the only way it'll even the score. But murder is not healing. Yes, yes, I can go to bed at night knowing Dennis Pegg is not going to harm another child.
Yep.
That is completely true. But if I'm sitting right now, we're not here, and I'm sitting in Northern State Prison, or I'd be in Rahway or Trenton because doing life. If I'm sitting there doing life from 2012 on, would I still feel that taking him out was such a great idea? You know, yes, I stopped, but now I'm sitting here wasting away for the entire rest of my life.
Yes.
And people who haven't been to prison and make the assumption, well, it would be worth it to me. No, you haven't been to prison. It's hell, and every day you're in hell, and your abuser's winning because now your abuser's controlling you all the way to your grave.
Yep.
That's what really dawned on me. I'm like, when I got arrested, I'm like, son of a bitch.
Yep.
That prick is gonna have control of my life from age 6 when he touched my open heart scar all the way to the grave because I'm going to die in prison.
Yeah.
How could I have friggin' allowed that?
Yes.
How did I let that happen? How did I give him that control?
Yeah.
And that's what I tell. Don't give that animal control.
You're 100% right. Your parole date, your best case scenario, had there been a murder conviction, and you had a great judge. Critchley, I think, even after a trial, would have given you the minimum. Even under the minimum, you'd be parole eligible in 2042. Okay? So under the minimum.
I would have been mid-80s.
Right. That's what you were looking at.
It's 2042. It's insanity.
2042.
I mean, that's why I say it's not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That's why these laws need to be changed and updated. And I just want to touch on that again. You know, like,
yeah.
They need a life sentence.
Yeah.
And just to go over the law change again in 2018.
With Lunsford, Jessica Lunsford.
So
I think
penetration.
it might have been a little bit earlier.
2017.
It might have been 16 or 15.
All right.
I'm not
yeah,
positive.
all right. Whenever it happened.
Yep.
But the law changed. So penetration under 13 or 12.
Under 13. It's
13.
12. Right. It's right.
Under 13 is a life sentence, and the minimum the judge gives is 25
years. Yes.
And all right,
yeah,
that's a huge difference from where it was.
It's a big change. Now, it creates problems at times too, though. So let me get into that for a second too.
Yeah.
Right? You know, if you have a Jessica Lunsford case and you're the prosecutor, remember I was telling you before, sometimes these cases can be really difficult to prove.
Right.
Well, you know, the law doesn't really give you anywhere to go. There's no, you know, if the best sentence is 25 years, a lot of times we want to discount or give a plea offer on a case like that, not because we want to give anything to the defendant, only because we might lose, you know, the case.
Let me stop you there. I had a guest on a little while back, and he was sexually abused over 300 times by this guy. And he literally, and I got to take my hat off to this dude, he literally got anally raped by the guy, didn't go to the bathroom, kept his semen inside of him, and went to a police station and said, I have the guy's semen inside me.
Wow.
And they took him to the hospital and got the guy that way.
Wow.
What is a 10-year-old who was raped supposed to do when they come in to get that, in order for you to get that life sentence and not just say, all right, we don't really have enough evidence, let's try to get a plea deal out of the guy?
So what we do is, you know, we build the case from the time the child comes in to give that initial interview, you know, the finding words interview, which in Sussex we do at Ginny's house. That's such an important interview right there, because under the 10 years exception, we can play that in court. Even though it's an out-of-court statement from the victim, that gets played in court. So that's like testimony from the victim now coming in through this tape, through this videotape. So we want to get that right. So if law enforcement does a good job during that interview, then you go and you start looking for corroboration. All right. Are there any fresh complaint witnesses? Did the child victim tell any other friends or any other people? We can get that in through what's called a fresh complaint, exception. Looking for corroboration in a great case. Listen, if you have DNA, it's very rare that you get that. Man, yeah, home run. We're going to have the child medically examined. Is there any physical evidence,
signs
of trauma,
penetration, in areas,
and that can be very compelling. All the investigative steps that we're going to run through, and then at the end we get one run at the offender. We're going to try to talk to him. Now, he could lawyer up, he could refuse to talk to us, but we're going to do our best to try to get a statement from that person. A lot of times people come in a little arrogant. They think they're smarter than the police. They think that they can talk their way through this.
Which is why victims never get the apology from. They are arrogant.
They're arrogant,
and they can never let that guard down to admit what they've done.
And they also tend to be prominent people in the community. How are you kidding me with this allegation? They think they just with a discussion, just have it go away.
What's the percentage you've seen where it's someone known? How often is it the stranger or the guy under the bridge who grabs a kid versus somebody who's prominent, who's well known, who's a family member?
The vast majority.
95%.
Yeah, exactly. It's
almost 100%. It's somebody known.
What you always hear, it's the last person we would have thought.
Right.
Yeah, you always hear that, and it tends to be, somebody that has not only access, to the child, but is also trusted for one reason or another. So in the case of Dennis, right, he had the credentials, law enforcement, community involvement. You asked anybody else about that? Yeah, good guy, so.
He was in the Kiwanis Club, which is for the betterment of children in the community.
Gotta be kidding.
He's in the Audubon Society.
Yeah.
Taking youngsters out to bird watch.
That's true.
He was an honorary member of Boys Town. The list goes on and on and on. It's frightening.
So one thing, I do think Lunsford was a little bit earlier. So I just gotta know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
but that was the changing of the guard for the law.
It was, no question. Yeah. We've had a lot of good changes though.
And that's why all states need to update their criminal and civil laws. I think the last time I looked, mid 37 states had updated the civil laws.
Yeah.
For recourse.
Yeah.
The criminal, I haven't looked. That's really a state by state basis.
And another good thing too is NERA applies also to most sex crimes now. So that's a No Early Release Act. So even if it doesn't meet the Lunsford penetration under 13, you still have NERA on a lot of these offenses.
So the only reason you would do a plea deal in a sex case is you don't have DNA.
Right. Don't have a confession.
Don't have a confession. You don't have a corroborating witness. They told their classmate or mom or father.
Right. Talking to the victim's therapist, and she may not or he may not be up to testifying for whatever reason.
You take them for a physical examination. There's not trauma in the sexual organs.
Yes. And all those things, it doesn't mean that the child is not telling the truth.
Right. Why would other than a divorce where the jaded mother is making the child say something, why else is the child saying that?
The fundamental question, whether you're prosecuting a sex assault case against a child or you're defending one, either way, both sides are going to talk about that exact question. Is you have a child who said this person did this to them. Why would they make that up? Why from the defense side, you kind of need an answer to that question, because that by itself is pretty powerful. So I don't mean to minimize if we don't have this corroboration that we could never prove it. No, if we have a good tender years tape, like a good initial forensic interview, and maybe just a little bit more, that might be enough.
Does penetration fall orally?
Yes.
Does oral
Yes.
penetration count under that?
It counts. Yes, it does.
So it does.
Yes, it
All right,
does.
so that would fall anything inside the body.
Anything inside.
So just touching or whatever would be outside of that.
Outside. And so that's a contact, and it's just sexual contact, and just 1 degree less with the contact.
Back when my case happened, the look back was 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
So the abuse would have had to have happened within that 5 to 10 year period. With the new law, what's the look back?